So far, so good. Juan Miro hailed from Catalonia. We're told he was a quiet man. He spoke very little. He was short in stature, very dapper, often wearing a dark blue business suit when out and about, and the very antithesis of a womanizer. A similar personality to Magritte, really. He was born in Barcelona in 1893. His father was a goldsmith and watchmaker. He intended Miro for a career in business. At 17, Miro completed a training course at a chemical company while painting in his spare time. Miro later writes, and I quote, "Fights with the family, gave up painting to work in an office, catastrophe. Do drawings on account books and am fired." At 19, he entered the Gali Academy and devoted his life entirely to art. At first, his work must be regarded as expressionist, as in this still life with rose, with intensive colors, I should say, and lively strokes, as you can see there. Bold, strong colors, dark outlines. The epitome of expressionism. A year later, he produced this portrait of his friend Enrique Reichardt, with whom he shared a studio. Notice the Japanese print in the background, its delicacy in sharp contrast with the portrait's heavy lines and powerful color. Miro is already well on his way to being an exponent of the 20th century avant-garde movement, heavily influenced by the Fauves in France. Though he hadn't traveled outside Catalonia at this point, not even to Madrid. His portrait of Vincent Nubiola is painted again in the expressionist style, giving the subject a certain restlessness. His rhythmic, heavy lines suggest the nervy idiosyncrasy of the painter rather than the subject. And that, of course, is the essence of expressionism, where the artist expresses himself through his painting. We can also surely discern the influence of Van Gogh and Cubism. Nubiola was a professor of agriculture, and this portrait was included in Miro's first exhibition of the following year. He was also painting landscapes at this time, similarly expressionist, but flirting with surrealism, as you can see. Prade's The Village. So very strong colors again, bold lines, and no adherence to representationality, if there's such a word. So he's not interested in perspective or getting the subject absolutely right, but he's more interested in using the subject to create a surrealist, expressionist painting. Similarly with this painting, Prade's A Street, and we obviously, again, you can discern the influence of Van Gogh, especially in the sky. In his landscape Koreana, Miro has set aside natural colours and disregarded perspective again, as well as any adherence to spatial dimension, to produce this abstract painting. The landscape is near his home village of Montreuil, to where he returned again and again. He seems to be experimenting with colour, juxtaposing yellows, greens, blues, and purples. Yellow is the predominant colour in this painting, as you can see. And they're always strong colours. There's nothing about the wash, which he will come to use later. We'll see he uses extensively in his constellation paintings. But at the moment, he's really only interested in strong, powerful, visually arresting paintings. Now, these paintings featured in his first one-man show in 1918, as well as in the magazine, the surrealist magazine North South, which is indicated in this area here, Nord Sud. Arranged in a radial fashion on the tabletop, Miro has placed eclectic homespun items like a pot plant and scissors. In the center, as I was just pointed out, this is a surrealist magazine, North South, which is named after a Parisian metro line. The magazine championed Dada and surrealism with contributors like Apollinaire and André Breton. There's also, you'll notice, a book by Goethe, which may be intended to reference the Germans' colour theories. Miro was quite aware of other art movements in Europe, though there was little chance of him to travel there because World War I was raging at the time. He may have got his ideas from talking to artists who had fled to neutral Spain to avoid the war. Very colourful again. Now let's have a quick look at Miro and see what he actually looked like at various stages of his life. Vegetable garden with donkey painted at Montreuil. He wrote at the time, and I quote, "Right now, what interests me is the calligraphy of a tree or a rooftop, leaf by leaf, twig by twig, blade of grass by blade of grass, tile by tile. Next winter, the critics will continue to say that I persist in my disorientation. The moment I begin to work on a canvas, I fall in love with it, the love that is the daughter of gradual understanding." End of quote. His colours are more muted now, as you can see, more earthen, and the treatment of details verging on the naive. The donkey is a good indication of that. And what he's created, rather than an abstract expressionist painting, is a painting full of pattern and shapes and lines, as you can see. Non-representational, also. He is now in his late 20s, and with the war ended at last in Paris, he's now able to travel to Paris. This painting is called The Table, or Still Life with Rabbit. And while the table is broken down into geometric shapes under the influence of Cubism, the items on the table are represented faithfully. In fact, the cock and the rabbit look as though they are alive. There's the cock and there's the rabbit. The painting is dominated by yellow, as you can see, and these dark areas make for vivid contrast. Miro is still experimenting with style and with color. The colors continue to be vibrant and pleasing. So in 1920, the war having ended, Miro arrived in Paris with little or no money. He met Picasso, who he tells us was somewhat standoffish until he saw Miro's work. Interestingly, Miro later wrote, and I quote, "The visit to his studio," Picasso's studio that is, "the visit to his studio made my spirits sink. Everything is done for the dealer. The French are doomed because they paint to sell." Miro's own dealer, Delmo, was able to place one or two of his paintings in private collections. Meanwhile, Miro set himself up in a studio shared with a Spanish sculptor in Rue Blomet. He painted there until 1927. He needed absolute solitude and peace in order to paint. Previously, before coming to Paris, he painted these two nudes, which show again the influence of Expressionism on the one on the left and Cubism in the one on the right. In 1921, he had his first exhibition in Paris, where he managed to sell not one single painting. In the summer, he returned to Montreuil, his home village, where he resolved to paint uninfluenced by Fauvism and Cubism, but concentrated on abstract geometric forms, as in this standing nude. On one level, he's painted a nude, but on another, it's an amalgam of geometric moving parts. She has a certain classical statuesque quality about her. And it's said the white kneecap, white breasts with rigid red nipples, her white fingernails and black hair encourage our gaze to zigzag over the canvas. Taking into account the part frame and the green dais, Miro has produced a highly balanced composition. So you can see all sorts of influences in this painting. And again, it's dominated by a strong orange color, and orange and veering towards yellow. And we've got the yellow and blue, yellow and green dais that she's standing on. Curious that he should part paint this frame instead of painting it all the way around. I suppose a concession to surrealism. This is quite a large painting. It's 4 foot by over 3 foot, as you can see. It was in the year 1921, Miro began work on possibly his most lauded painting, The Farm. He finished it in Paris the following year. It took him 9 months to paint, working for 7 or 8 hours a day. Miro said it was, and I quote, "a summary of my entire life in the countryside, and also the point of departure for what was to follow." Ernest Hemingway bought this painting for 5,000 francs after he's been rejected by many galleries in Paris. In the foreground, Miro has painted a watering can. There we are, a green watering can with a red nozzle. And the bucket seems to be curtsying towards the watering can. Behind is a folded newspaper trapped under the can. There we are, and it's called intransigeant, translated to be intransigent. It's trapped under the watering can as though making a statement. If our eye travels over the red tiles, there we have the red tiles, we come to 7 footprints. There we are. The path, however, continues where the footprints leave off, and our eye follows it to a water trough where a woman leans into the water trough. Behind her is a bucket. Let me find the bucket for you. A bucket and a very curious frog-like creature there. Behind the trough, we see a mill powered by a mule. There we are. There's the mill, and there's the mule going round and round and round all day long. To the left, a dog appears to bark at the moon. Let me find the dog for you. There's the dog. I'm not quite sure where the moon is. Oh, yes, the moon is there, of course. That's what I Zoom is eclipsing it at the moment. And so on. There are many things in this painting, as you can see. The chicken coop is absolutely jam-packed with items, but they are all given their own space. So it appears crowded on one level, but each item is surrounded by space so that you can work out what they are, especially if you were standing in front of it. This is a painting is just over 4 foot by 5 foot, so you would be able to pick out these various details. The tree is a stylized eucalyptus tree thought to be a symbol of the Catalan people, with its deep roots and potential for growth. Nativism has taken hold of the avant-garde, especially under the influence of Henri Rousseau, who would place figures and items on his canvas rather like a child might place dolls in the doll's house. Now, I put a photograph of the actual building that the farm that he's painting, so that you can get some idea of. You can quite clearly see the shape of the pine end and the. Well, I hate not windows, but the loft, the warehouse door, as it were, on that side, and then the chicken coop is sort of there, I think, and then this building is represented on the other side. So there is an attempt at representation there. This tree is disregarded, but that tree is stylized, as I mentioned. So it's interesting to see how he has transformed the picture, or the not that he's painted from this picture. He hasn't. Obviously, he's painted it from real life, but it's just an indication of how he is of his style. In fact, we got a rear end of a horse in this stable on the extreme left here. Every time you look at this painting, you see something new. Look at this cart here. It's absolutely jam-packed with stuff. Also in the background towards the centre is a ramshackle house with a chimney. And further left a tree-like object bearing the flags of France, Spain, and Catalonia. The carbide lamp, in the carbide lamp, Miro reduces his objects to clearly defined forms against a plain background so that they stand out clearly. Only the lamp is shaded, as you can see. The carbide lamp, or acetylene gas lamp, is a simple lamp that produces and burns acetylene. So this painting is definitely moving towards the surrealism of his later paintings. I'm not quite sure what's going on this semicircle. It looks as though it could be a plate, half of a plate. And again, this shape here is almost like a flat iron, but it's just suggested by the shape. More recognizable is the farmer's wife. Strong lines, as you can see, dark, strong lines. And it's said that this plate again, this round shape, he added it later because he'd made the cat too big. The farmer's wife is holding a dead rabbit that she's presumably going to cook for tea. Not too sure what else is going on in this painting. Look at her huge legs. This is definitely a surrealist painting. After 1923, Miro began a new cosmos of beings and symbols, as in the calculation. He called these pictures poems because they combined color, word, and numbers. So you can see the numbers coming down from the top. And notice how now he's using a thin wash as a background so that the shapes and lines that he paints stand out vigorously. The tilled field is difficult to come to terms with, so I'm going to quote an explanation of its facets while you look at it directly from Wikipedia. Wiki says, the painting is divided into 3 areas by 2 horizontal lines, perhaps representing the sky, earth, and sea. So there we are. There's one horizontal line. There's another. So we've got the earth, the sea, and the sky, according to Wikipedia. A diagonal line seems to put the top right corner of the painting in the dark of night, while the rest, there we are, while the rest is in the light of day. The painting is littered with confused mixture of forms, many with aspects of humans, animals, and plants. The various animal forms are derived from Catalan ceramics, including a lizard wearing a conical hat. And there is the lizard wearing the conical hat. The grotesqueness of some of these figures remind me a little bit of Hieronymus Bosch. A tree to the right of the center has a large eye in its green crown and a human ear on its brown trunk. So this is what it's referring to. There is the eye, gaily coloured, as you can see, and the ear, again, vivid in its yellow, reds, and pinks, and orange. Very colourful. Hanging from the tree is a shape covered with more eyes, and that's what it's referring to. Possibly a pine cone, or perhaps a leaf or a spider. At the base of the tree is a folded newspaper with the French word jour. And there we are. Further right in the background is a human figure following a cattle-drawn plough. There we are. There's the human figure, based on the Altamira cave paintings. Also in the background, towards the center, is a ramshackle house with a chimney. There we are. And further left, a tree-like object bearing the flags of France, Spain, and Catalonia. So there we are, the tree-like object. And those are the three flags. The French flag, clearly discernible. An awful lot going on in this painting, typical of Miro. A sister painting. This is a sister painting. It's called Catalan Landscape, or The Hunter. Very similar in size and style. Only the pipe of the hunter can be identified. Now then, let's find the hunter. Let's find the pipe. There we are. This is the hunter, believe it or not, this cone shape. This is the hunter. It's very difficult to work Miro's symbolism out. This is the hunter. This line going up, and this triangle would be his head. There's an obvious ear, and we can see the pipe there. The pipe is lit. The background is a thin wash of yellow and raw sienna. I'm just going to let you look at this painting without explanation, other than a quote from MoMA, and this is what it says in its catalogue. Miro depicts the French, Catalan, and Spanish flags in the background. Not quite sure where they are. In the foreground, he writes the word sard. There we are. Short for sardana, Catalonia's national dance. The truncated word also references the fragmented letters and words of the Dadaist and Surrealist poetry by which he was influenced. So that's MoMA's explanation of this painting. Not particularly helpful, I don't think. In 1924, André Breton published the Surrealist Manifesto, and Miro painted several more canvases with that in mind. This one is called The Harlequin's Carnival, littered with whimsical creatures, and it's a sort of dreamscape. Drafts of these paintings show meticulous planning. Miro would establish background colours in a thin wash against which he would litter it with a variety of objects, some recognisable, like the Jack in the Box. There's the Jack in the Box, though it's a strange-looking Jack, but mostly fanciful and always well-defined in bright colours. He once wrote, "How did I think up my drawings and my ideas for painting? I'd go to bed in my Paris studio, and sometimes I hadn't had any supper. I saw things, and I jotted them down in a notebook. I saw shapes on the ceiling." He often mentioned hallucinations caused by hunger. so much in this painting, but it's not, on one level, it's not confused because everything is given, everything is painted in its own space. So the composition is well composed. The composition has been given a lot of thought to. He's very seems to be fond of ears, sticking ears in various places. There's an ear on the extreme left there. There's a guitar there, cleft of music, all sorts of things. This is a bathing woman or woman bathing. In this painting, the line is everything, but it is no longer static. We are now firmly into the serialist tradition. So there's the line. This is the woman who's actually bathing. There's her head. This is her body, represented just by a very thin line. And this black amorphous shape I take to represent the bath, or maybe the whole painting represents the bath. And you'll notice how we've got a moon there, so maybe it's not the bath water, maybe it's the sky. And we got a curious little something painted there in yellow. And then in the extreme right, we've got three red dots, which defy any sort of explanation. And then these yellow wavy lines, which may represent the may represent water. Who knows? The Birth of the World is a huge painting, 8 foot by 6'6". Miro has painted a sort of genesis, the very beginnings of life. MoMA, where it's hung, tells us, and I quote, "To make this work, Miro poured, brushed, and flung paint on an unevenly primed canvas so that the paint soaked into some areas and rested on top in others. The bird or kite, shooting star, balloon, and the figure with the white head may all seem somehow familiar, yet their association is illogical." So there's the figure with the white head. There's the balloon. There's the kite. I'm quite sure where the shooting star is. Describing his method, Miro said, "Rather than setting out to paint something, I begin painting, and as I paint, the picture begins to assert itself or suggest itself under my brush. The first stage is free, unconscious. The second stage is carefully calculated." Miro admitted that this was akin to automatic writing, where the artist would let his brush wander where it will. For automatic writing, read automatic painting. Dog barking at the moon. We've seen a dog barking at the moon already, but this is the subject of the painting now. And the very powerful contrasts in this painting. The bright colors and humorous subject matter create a fun, playful mood. However, the dark background and the vast empty spaces between the dog, the ladder, and the moon also produce a sense of isolation. The ladder reaches towards empty space, as you can see. And it's not painted uniformly. The rungs are painted in pale red, whereas this upright is painted in yellow, and the one on the right painted in white as far as it goes, and then it disappears into space. The original sketch for the painting included words with the moon telling the dog that it does not care about his barking. However, those words have been removed. So the dog is cartoon-like, painted in vivid, contrasting colours, as is the moon. Between 1925 and 1927, Miro completed over 130 pictures, mostly untitled. Person throwing a stone at a bird. So he's using line now to punctuate these pictures. In this picture, they suggest the arm's momentum. This is the person throwing the stone, obviously a surrealist figure. The path of the stone, there's the stone, and the rooster's flight, while also establishing a unifying triangle. We've encompassed this classical triangle shape that artists are very fond of. No attempt at all at representation of anything, completely abstract. In 1928, he visited the Netherlands and saw many of the old Dutch masters. He gave several of them 20th century treatment. So there we've got Sauk's lute player on the right, and this is Miro's interpretation of it. And you can make out the lute quite clearly there, and the lady sitting at the table is represented by this white amorphous shape. The dog is more recognizable in the bottom left-hand corner, but the window and the buildings outside of the window are fancifully painted. Yet he's kept this upright here with the ferrule on it, and painted it in bright colours there, and the painting on the wall there is represented with that little cartouche there. There is another Dutch interior. This is a take on Jan Steen's Cat's Dancing Lesson. And again, he's used the blue of the dress of the flute player to actually represent the flute player herself. Though the flute he's made into a round sickle-like shape. And then the various characters around the table are unrecognizable, except for the dog, probably. The dog, there's the dog. I'm not quite sure what that is in the bottom right-hand corner. It doesn't seem to relate to anything particularly, unless it's this cloth, maybe. Miro was now living and working in a new studio near to where Jan Arp, Max Ernst, and Magritte were painting. You can see Arp's surrealist influence in the painting landscape, the hair in its undulating lines. Miro said that he was inspired to paint the canvas when he saw a hare dart across a field on a summer evening, apparently transfixed by the moon and the comet. So we can see the moon up there, And I think this must represent the comet and its huge tail. There's no doubting the shape that represents the hare dashing across the field. Not quite sure what that shape is representing. In 1929, Miro married, and 9 months later, his only child was born in Barcelona, a girl. By 1932, he was again living in Catalonia, having moved his new family into his mother's home in Barcelona, where he could live cheaper during the years of recession. The art market was in the doldrums, and anyway, he had drifted away from the surrealist group in Paris. In 1933, he produced this collaged work, simply entitled Painting. The work suggests choreography, as though the pieces of collage are dancers on a stage. The color shapes harmonize in a rhythmic pattern to which the linear symbols are also subject. And although this series of paintings was one of Miro's most abstract works, he refused throughout his life to be pigeonholed as an abstract artist. So there we have a collage, basically. Again, we got a thin blue wash in the background and thin lines as well. And the shapes are obviously cutouts. Composition 1933 is a painting of similar dimensions from the same stable as the previous painting. So again, another collage. This time the background is divided into various colors, mainly blue on the left and madder brown or pinks on the right. And then the shapes seem to be arbitrary. And we've got these very thin lines again at various places. They seem to make some sort of connection, possibly with the... It's difficult to rationalize these paintings. You either you like them or you don't. In 1934, he designed a wall tapestry, Swallow Love, in which the distribution of body parts and shapes creates an effect of openness and free fall. This is a very large painting, as you can see, 6 foot by 10 foot. And again, like a lot of his paintings, it's in the MoMA in New York. These were the first years of the new republic in Spain, but despite the mayhem that was ushered in, Miro lived a quiet life unaffected by politics. The following year, he produced this collage, Rope and People, where he uses an unraveling coil of rope as a symbol of violence to build the painting around. The rope is also anthropomorphic. As you can see, there's an arm there and an arm there. And the coil is unraveled at the bottom to suggest feet. Pieces of rope appear in the next painting, produced much later in 1950, simply entitled Painting Again. So we got knotted rope here in the center and another curl of rope there. The background is light washes again, but this time, rather than blocks of monochromic colours. He's mixed it. He's letting them blend one into the other. I haven't got the dimensions of this painting. I don't know how big it is. This is a complete contrast. Still life with old shoe. It's a still life of everyday objects. A bottle, a loaf, an apple with a fork sticking out of it, and the eponymous shoe. They're painted in glowing acidic colours, which seem to transform these simple objects into an almost apocalyptic vision. MoMA makes the comment that all the different types of work that Miro created come together in this work. Miro wrote that he was looking for profound and fascinating reality. He wanted to create a work which would stand up to a good still life by Velázquez. Well, that stretches our imagination beyond breaking point, I think. But it's a very vivid painting, quite a large painting as well, just under 3 foot by and just under 4 foot. It's almost psychedelic. Heavily contrasted as well, these black shapes and very, very bright colors. After the outbreak of the Spanish Civil War, Miro moved his family back to Paris. This painting is called Man and Woman in Front of a Pile of Excrement. Miro said that the subject resulted from trying to represent the tragedy and torture of the Spanish Civil War. The painting was one of 12 known as the wild paintings, half of which were painted on copper, like this one. So this is painted on copper. Miro said that the reference to excrement comes from a saying by Rembrandt that when he came to painting, rubies and diamonds were found in dung heaps. You wonder where the excrement is. This is the excrement there. He's almost anthropomorphized it. Again, another almost psychedelic painting, dark background against which you've got these very bright oranges and yellows and strange shapes which defy explanation, rational explanation anyway. Dewdrop falling from a bird's wing wakes Rosalie, this is called actually. It belongs to the so-called burlap or Hessian series, where Miro deliberately used coarse material instead of painter's canvas. Stylized eye motifs stand out of a fantastical narrative. The colors are warm. Typical of surrealist principles, it resists interpretation, preferring to evoke emotion instead. So you can quite clearly see the coarse canvas that it's painted on, the Hessian or whatever he used, or burlap. The bird's wing, well, your guess is as good as mine. And where Rosalie is, again, that could be Rosalie there. It seems to be a fish shape. All sorts of shapes going on in this painting. Just before Hitler invaded Paris, Miro fled back to Catalonia with his family. Once there, he began to paint his Constellation series using gouache, which was more opaque than watercolor. Again, another painting with a long title, the beautiful bird revealing the unknown to a pair of lovers. This is quite a small painting, only 15 by 18. He strives for compositional balance in these constellation paintings. Notice, as we have already seen, how lines not only string together free-flowing objects, but bisect them to create areas of color. So there's a line bisecting the shapes there, so that on the right he's painted in a dark color, and on the left he's painted in red. And the background is this very thin wash of light yellows and greys, I would say. These small constellation paintings were smuggled into New York and some were exhibited at the Matisse Gallery there. They had a profound effect on artists such as Jackson Pollock and Gorky. This one is called Awakening at Dawn, done with gouache on paper. Again, quite small, 18 by 15, as you can see, but very colourful. Almost nothing is recognizable in this painting. They're just basically shapes. We got a figure there which could be the head with two eyes and a pair of breasts, maybe, but that's about all you can easily recognize in this painting. And this one is called The Morning Star, painted in 1940. Again, very small painting. And again, painted in a very similar fashion. Miro is very fond of eyes. We've seen how he likes the odd ear here and there, but he's got a lot of eyes in this painting. One there and several there, and two down there. In 1947, Miro traveled to the States for the first time. Since the end of the war, Miro and the ceramicist Joseph Artigas had worked together on large ceramic murals, such as this wall at the UNESCO building in Paris in 1955. I apologize for the quality of the reproduction, but it was such a small image that I had to blow it up. It's lost some, but it gives you an indication anyway of how the wall was done. The exterior wall was 3 meters high and 7 meters long. It's called the Sun Wall. Miro designed the Sun Wall based on cave paintings. Hundreds of tiles were fired by Artigas. 34 firings were required in all. They used 25 tons of wood, 4,000 kilograms of clay, 200 kilos of enamel, and 30 kilograms of color. It's believed the first firing failed. They then went on to make the Moon Wall. These walls were greeted with much acclaim by the critics and public alike. Again, unfortunately, that's not very distinct. The quality of the reproduction suffers somewhat. As for his paintings during the early 60s, they became emptier and were often painted in monochrome. This triptych blue, for instance, was said to be influenced by the Americans Pollock and Mark Rothko, who had made a deep impression on Miro. So these are large paintings, 11 foot, each one is 11 foot by 10 foot. You've got to imagine that, because they don't look like large paintings the way I've put them enfilade like that, but they are large paintings, and basically, obviously, blue is the predominant color, and then we've got these odd little shapes and lines typical of Miro. What they represent, I don't know. At the age of 80, he painted May in reference to the student riots in Paris of that year. You'll remember those, of course, mainly centered around the Sorbonne, I seem to remember. So there we got a drip painting, and we think of Jackson Pollock and his drip paintings. Miro is not averse to copying the young painters of the day. This is 2 meters square, so it's a very large painting again. It would be quite spectacular to stand in front of it, I'm thinking. Juan Miro died at his home in Palma, Mallorca. He was living in Mallorca in 1983. During his 90 years, he painted at least 2,000 oil paintings. And I haven't had time to deal with the many sculptures and ceramic items that he produced. So I'm going to stop there.